So we finally made it. We're going to deploy our Parallax library onto NPM using Travis continuous integration and deployment. So I've actually already deployed the Parallax library to NPM in the process of planning out this series. But in this part, I've taken all of the code that we've made up until this point and put it into a new directory that is uninitialized, it has no Git repository, and it has nothing in it. So I'm going to create the Git repository, push it to GitHub, link it with Travis, deploy it to NPM, so you can see the whole process from start to finish. So we can see here all of the files that we've made in the previous parts. So I'll just run git init to initialize a Git repository, and git status will show us all of the files that are ready to be committed into Git. But before I commit the files, there's just a few things we're going to need to tidy up. So the first thing to think about is we're going to need a few more npm scripts to run all of the tasks that we want to do individually. For example, linting. We have the lint staged script set up, and that will run ESLint and prettier, etc. on the staged files. But with Travis, we may want to run linting on all of our source files, not just the staged ones. So we'll need npm scripts to run each of those tasks individually. So I will come into here and we can see the scripts that we have already. So we have build and dev that run rollup, we have test and test watch that run jest, and we have that pre-commit script that runs lint staged. But I'll just paste in the extra scripts that we want here, and I'll remove the sidebar so we can see a bit nicer. So we have a lint script that just runs ESLint across all of our source files. I have a format script that runs prettier -- write, which will write in place in the files, and it will run through all of the source files that end in any of these extensions. And then I've added a cover script that just runs a coverage report over all of our tests using jest. And then finally, a clean script that just removes the dist directory. And we're removing it using a tool called rimraf, which we'll install in a second. And rimraf is just a cross-platform way of running rm-rf. So if you're on a Linux machine like I am right now, I could come in and write rm-rf and a directory name, and that would delete that directory. But if I use that in my npm script, and then somebody on a Windows machine pulled down this repository and ran that script, it would fail, because Windows has no idea what rm-rf means. So rimraf is just a tool that allows that behavior to happen seamlessly cross-platform. So we'll remove that because we don't want to accidentally delete anything. So then I'll run yarn add --dev rimraf, if I could spell it correctly, rimraf. So now before we make our initial commit into this repo, there's just one more file we need to add, which is called Npm Rc. And into this, we'll just copy in registry equals and then this URL. And this just tells NPM that we want to use the actual NPM registry to deploy our library to. So now we can come out and run git status again. And you'll notice here we do have a Git Ignore, and this is important. So if we ls, we can see we have a node modules directory. But if we open up the Git Ignore, we're ignoring node modules. And this is really important. If you don't ignore that node modules directory in this Git Ignore, you'll end up committing all of the code from the node modules directory. And if you've dealt with NPM before, you'll know that that node modules directory can get massive. And it's all code that we don't need in our repository, because we have the dependencies listed in the package JSON. So if anybody else gets hold of it, they can just npm install all of those dependencies and build the node modules themselves. So we don't want to commit that. So that's really important to note. So now that we have that, we can git add everything, git commit, we'll say initial commit. And here you're seeing Husky take over with the git commit. And now you can see we have 9 problems. And if we run git status, nothing's been committed. And this is because we ran the pre-commit hook and it failed. So if we scroll up, we can see that this was the pre-commit hooks running through Husky, which is what we set up in the previous part. And ESLint failed. And that means that none of our code gets committed. And the failures we can see here, so there was some P is unassigned, but then there's also things like this where unexpected token in the JSON. But we don't want ESLint running on files like this on our package JSON or this CSS file or anything in this examples directory. So we can create something called an ESLint ignore. So we'll create that, ESLint ignore. And here we want to ignore all JSON, we want to ignore all CSS, and we want to ignore everything in the examples directory. And we'll also ignore all the YAML files. And we'll also ignore everything in the test directory. So now if we run git commit again, so now we have 1 error and 7 warnings. So this is all just saying that these files have been ignored. And then we have this error, which is use object destructuring. So that is an index.js line 42. So if we open up source index.js and go down to line 42, we can see it's this const duration equals module.duration. And ESLint is saying that it would prefer object destructuring. So that I'll just do that now. So that is this syntax. So this is some fancy ES6 syntax that gets hold of duration inside the module object. Now we'll come out of here, run git status again, and we've modified the index.js, and we have this new ESLint ignore. So we'll add all of that, run git status again, and we've got everything there. So now we can run git commit and run that initial commit again. And now you can see ESLint passed, and there we go. So everything passed this time. We have our check marks, and everything is committed. So now if we run git status, there's nothing to commit, and git log, we can see initial commit. So now we need to create a repository on GitHub to actually push this code to. So we'll head over to GitHub, and I'll hit new, and I'll call it parallax provider tut, create the repository, and I'll grab hold of the SSH URL because I have SSH keys set up on my machine. So then I can just run git remote add origin, paste in that URL, and then git push origin master, and that will push our code up to GitHub. We can come back and we can refresh, and all of our code is now there. So the next step from here is to create an account at Travis. So we'll head over to travis-ci.org. You can create an account using your GitHub profile, and then from there you should be presented with a page that looks something like this. So we can search for our repository using this search box, and I'll search for the name, we click on it, and it'll say that it's not active. We just click activate repository, and then now Travis is listening to GitHub for changes at this repository. But of course, we're going to need to tell Travis what to do every time there is a change. And that is where the idea of the Travis configuration comes in. So if we head back to the terminal, we can create a new file and we'll call it travis.yaml. And into here, I'll paste in a very basic Travis configuration. So we're just specifying that the language of our repository is Node.js, and we're using Node version 8. But we could use any version of Node, and we could use several of them if we wanted to by just specifying more of these bullet points. And we could say 8, 9, 10, whatever we want. And then cache, you don't need to worry about that. We just need that because I like to use yarn. And then we're specifying to install our repository, you need to run the yarn install script. And then the actual scripts that we want to run as part of our build pipeline is yarn lint. So that's why we needed to create a separate linting npm script, and then yarn test, and then yarn build. So with that, we can save the file, and if we run git status, we can see we have this new Travis configuration. So we can git add Travis configuration, git commit, added a basic Travis config, and there our linters ran, so we can git push origin master. So now GitHub will notify Travis that there's been changes to the repository. Travis will take a look and it will see our Travis YAML file. So it will know what to do and it will just follow the steps that we specified and run those against our repository. So if we come back into Travis and we go over to our build history, we can see that added a basic Travis config, that was our commit, and it's triggered a new build. And if we go into that, we can see the build actually running. So this will actually update in real time as our build progresses. So I'll just let that finish now and I'll be back when the Travis build has completed. And we're back with a successfully completed build on Travis. So we can see we have a nice check mark, it's all green, looks wonderful. If we scroll down, we can see what actually occurred. So we can see here the yarn lint exited with 0, so that was a success. And then the tests, we can see each individual test that passed. And then the yarn build also exited with 0, so that was also successful. So our whole build was successful. So that is the basics of what continuous integration is. It's Travis is always listening to your repository, and every time there's a change, it will run the build steps that you specified to make sure that everything is still in order. And if anything ever fails, you'll get notified of that, and you can pick up on subtle regressions very, very quickly, especially when your team is large and lots of people are committing code from all over the place. But of course, the Travis configuration that we've just specified is quite basic, but we're going to need to up the ante and have a bit more complexity so that we can tell Travis to deploy to npm under certain conditions. So before we do that, we'll need to set up an account with npm. So we'll head over to npmjs.com and sign up for an account. When you've done that, you can head up to the little account icon and go down to tokens. So this is where we're going to create some API tokens that we can add to our repository on Travis, which will allow Travis to deploy to our npm account on our behalf. So we'll just hit create new token, and we want a read and publish token, so we'll create that. And it will think about it for a little while, and then eventually, hopefully, it's going to create a token for us. And there we are, successfully created a new token. So if we just click here, it'll copy it to the clipboard, and we'll head back to Travis. And there's a button over here that says more options, and then we hit settings, and that will take us into the settings for this particular repository. And the one we want is environment variables. So we're going to want to set an environment variable for this API token and another environment variable for our npm email address. So I'll first create the email address. So npm_email in all caps, and then into the value field, I'll just put in the email address that I use with my npm account. So I'll add that as an environment variable. And then the next one is npm_token, and into the value field, we want to paste in the token that we've just got from npm. Paste that in, add that. So now Travis is aware of our credentials, and we can reference those environment variables in a newly updated Travis config. So that's what we'll do now. So I'll come back into the terminal, and we'll open back up that Travis configuration, and I'll just remove what we've already got, and I'll paste in a new configuration. And I'll just walk us through what we have now. So the top is just the same. We're specifying node version 8, caching yarn. The install script is yarn install, that's all the same. But now we have this new key called jobs. So before we just had a scripts key and specified 3 scripts we wanted to run. But now we have more of a complex pipeline. We have a build and test stage, and we have an npm release stage. So these are 2 separate stages that happen within the whole pipeline. So this one, the build and test stage, is just like what we had before. We have 3 scripts that run yarn lint, yarn test, and yarn build, just like we had before. But we've added in this new stage called npm release, and that runs yarn build initially, and then it has a deploy key. So Travis is aware of deployments. It understands what deploying is, and it has various providers that you can access. So we're going to use the npm provider, and then we need to specify an email and an API key. So we can use $npm email, so that's referencing the environment variable we've just set, and same with the npm token. And then we're specifying skip cleanup is true, and this is extremely important in your deploy scripts. So typically, Travis will run our scripts, like for example, in this case, yarn build, and yarn build produces some artifacts, i.e. the files that it actually built are spat out and stored somewhere. But Travis will typically clean those up. It'll just delete them because it's like, oh, the build step's finished and I don't need these files anymore, so it'll just throw them away. But we need to deploy those files somewhere. So we don't want Travis to throw them away just yet. So we specify skip cleanup to true, and that'll tell Travis, don't throw away these files just yet, because we might need them. And then the final thing we're saying is on tags equals true. So this build and test stage will just always run. Anytime Travis is triggered, it will run. And this stage will also always run, but the deploy step will only run if there's a tag on the commit that triggered this particular build. Because we don't want to release to npm on every single commit. We want to be able to have fine-grained control of when we release a new version. So we'll tag a new version in Git, and then on that tag, we want to release to npm. So we're specifying here that only run the deploy if there's a new tag present on the commit. And if it is, then you can deploy it, that's fine. But on every other commit, don't bother. And then the final thing we have is branches. So we want to specify the branches or the tags. So this is actually quite confusing. So this isn't just branches. This is commits that have some kind of label on them. So everything in the master branch will have the label of master. Like, label isn't a real term here, I'm just kind of using it as a way to anchor it in your mind. So anything on the master branch will trigger a Travis build, but then we're also specifying this regex, which is basically anything that starts with a V and then has any number of digits after it. And that will be the format that we use for our tags. So, for example, we might release a version like v0.0.1 or v1.3, and that's the format where it's v followed by a digit. So this is a very crude regex that's just going to match those tags. So then this branches only will trigger on anything that happens on the master branch or anything that has a tag that matches this regex. So with that, we can close out and we can commit this new Travis config. So we'll git add Travis config, git commit updated Travis config. So that runs all the linters, git push origin master, pushes that up to GitHub, and now we can come back into our Travis account and go over to build history, and we can see here updated Travis config has triggered a new build. And if we click on it, we'll see something different. So before, we saw the output of the build steps, but now we have different stages to the build steps. So that's what we see instead. So we have the build and test stage and the npm release stage. And then if we drill even further into the build and test, that's when we come and see the job log that we expected. So this will run the build and test, and when that completes, the next stage will start. So in this case, the next stage is the npm release. But we didn't tag this commit. So the build and test is obviously going to run, and then the npm release will run, but the deployment won't happen. It will skip the deployment because there isn't a valid tag. So we'll see that when everything's completed, we'll see that the npm release ran, but it skipped the deployment. So I'll come back when it's completed and we can take a look. So now we can see the two stages successfully passed. But if we drill into the npm release, we can see the yarn build exited with 0, so that was successful. But then we have this message that says skipping a deployment with the npm provider because this is not a tagged commit. So now we have the pipeline in place. All we have to do is tag a commit, push that tag to GitHub, Travis will pick it up, and it'll get deployed to npm. So let's do that. So we'll come back into the terminal and let's discuss Git tags. So there's two ways we can go about the tagging process. One is the manual way, where we just say git tag and then specify a tag number like v0.0.1, and that will tag the current commit. But if we check the package JSON, we have this version key, which is currently set to 0.0.0, and we want to keep that in sync with the version on Git. So if we run a git tag to update the version to 0.0.1, we also want to update this version in our package JSON. But fortunately, npm has a tool built in called npm version, which will allow us to bump a version using the semver spec. So we can bump the patch, the minor, or the major version. So if you don't know what semver is, you can go read about that. But basically we have three numbers. The first one is major, middle one is minor, and the third one is patch. And we can bump each one of those up using npm version. And then when we run one of those commands, npm version will bump this version in the package JSON. It will also add a git tag, which will correspond to that version, and it will create a new commit to specify that we've bumped the version. And that's a much easier workflow than doing all of that manually. So that's what we're going to do. And while we're in the package JSON, we can also take a look at the name here. So this name is important because this is what our package will be called on npm when we deploy it. So make sure that this is set to something that makes sense for your particular project. And the final thing to note is that we need to specify to npm what is the main file of our project. And of course, we've specified this main property here that's index.js, and that's the default. But the file that we want to specify is the one that gets created by rollup and put into the dist directory. So I'll just paste in the new versions and I'll remove that previous index.js. So we have the main module, which is dist, parallax provider, CJS. So that's the common JS module created by rollup. So if we just check out the rollup config just to refresh your memory, we're creating a UMD module, a common JS module, and an ECMAScript module. So that's 3 separate files that are getting spat out that use different module specs and therefore will run in different environments. And here we're saying our main module is the common JS one, the module, which is the ECMAScript module one, is the ESM, and then the one to run in the browser is the UMD version. So we've got those 3, and that just tells npm which files are which, so that when we deploy, npm will know what files it actually needs in the deploy process, and ultimately what files will need to be downloaded by an end user who uses our library. So now we'll come out of that and we can run npm version patch. And now we can see it's patched it. We can go back into our package JSON, and the version is now 0.0.1. And we can run git tag to take a look at the tags we have. We have a v0.0.1. And we can also check at the logs, and we can see here that it's also created a new commit for the 0.0.1 version. So now we want to push all of that to GitHub. So we'll say git push origin master -- tags, and it will push the new commit and the tags up to GitHub. And if we head over to GitHub, we can take a look at what that's done. We refresh the page. We now have one release, and if we click it, we have v0.0.1 as a release on this repository. And if we come into Travis, go over to build history, we can see a new build has triggered for master and a new build for v0.0.1. And that's because of the branches key inside of the Travis config. So the master tag matched, so it's triggering a build for master, but there was also a tag for v0.0.1. So that also triggered a build. So obviously master, if we click on it, it has the build and test and the npm release, but this isn't tagged, so the npm release will skip the deployment. But if we go into this one, the npm release is for a tagged commit, so this will actually deploy to npm. So I'll be back when this is finished, and if all things go correctly, we should have a new deployment to npm, and our library will be live for people to download through npm. So that's completed. So if we again drill into the npm release, we scroll down, we can see installing deployed dependencies, preparing deploy, deploying application. So hopefully that means if we head over to npm and go to our account and then click packages, we can see we have Parallax Provider Tutorial deployed to npm. So we can hit that, take a look at what's there, and there we go. We have 0.0.1 of Parallax Provider Tutorial deployed to npm. And of course we didn't add a readme to this, but if we did, that would show up here as the description on npm. And obviously here says we can install that using npm. So let's just do that now so that we can see it all in action. So we'll head over to the terminal again, and I'll create a new window in the terminal, and I'll just cd into temp, and I'll make a directory called parallax test, cd into that, and then from here we can yarn add parallax provider tutorial. And now it's installing that into there. And if we take a look at what we've got, take a look at the package JSON, we have Parallax Provider Tutorial v0.0.1, and that is now ready for anyone to use in their project. So I hope you enjoyed this whole series and you've learned a lot about how to create a library and how to deploy it to npm with continuous integration and all these kind of best practices that surround open source software. So if you did like this video, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell to get notified when I upload new videos. If you really like what I'm doing, I have a Patreon, so you can go check that out and help fund what I'm doing, creating these tutorials for free. But until the next video I do, stay hungry and keep coding.